This podcast is made possible by the generous support of the American people through the United States Agency for International Development. The content of this podcast are the sole responsibility of its creators and does not necessarily reflect the views of USAID or the United States government. Good afternoon, friends and listeners of the WABiLED podcast. My name is Ahmed Nassar, and I'm the Communications and Outreach Lead for the WABiLED program. So we are scrambling on this late August Tuesday with this impromptu podcast, just because we got some pretty exciting news last week from one of the countries in the region, the Republic of Benin, where we heard that there has been a relatively substantial confiscation of freshwater sea turtles. And that's a big deal just because it showcases that there is stronger enforcement, stronger wildlife enforcement in the country and on a regional level as well. So today there's a bunch of us here in the room. Maybe we can get everybody introducing themselves. But our main guest for today is Mr. Ulysse Korogone, who has recorded podcasts with us in the past and who we've traveled to a lot of countries in the world with. And Ulysse is the CITES focal points for the Republic of Benin. So Ulysse, bienvenue and welcome again to the WABiLED podcast. But yeah, I just thought maybe we'd go around the room real quick and everybody who's here and part of this conversation could just introduce themselves real quick.
Yeah, my name is Michael Balinga. I work for WABiLED as the lead for combating wildlife trafficking based out of our Accra office.
And I am Eduji Yomi. I am the Program and Digital Communications Specialist. I work with the communications team, but sometimes Michael makes me work for him.
All right. And Ulysse, maybe you can give yourself a bit of a stronger introduction than what I gave you.
Hello, thank you, Ahmed. I think you said everything we need to know. I'm Ulysse Korogone. I'm from Benin. I'm a Master CITES program alumni, graduate, and also CITES focal point for Benin. And also the coordinator of the National Task Force that is working on wildlife trafficking.
Amazing. Thank you, Ulysse, and thank you again for being with us. So like I said, we're going to keep this really formal. And just for our listeners, we're recording this with two small microphones. So please bear with us with some of the technical issues that may come about by this, but this should be a good one. Okay, so should I start by taking the first question, guys? And then all right, cool. So seizure, exciting, big deal. Maybe can we get some background on the whole story a little bit?
Yes, of course. I think since a few months, a few days in Benin, we are doing a lot of seizure. The last one was not the one on the freshwater turtles. The last one was an ivory tox that had been seized in the northern part of the country, just after the seizure on the freshwater turtles. So that's just shown how things are moving fast in Benin. And this starts from the training we start having with you guys from WABI and then from WABiLED. It's a training people from Customs Service, from Forestry Department, from police. So all these seizures are not only the fact of the Forestry Department. So coming back to the seizure on the freshwater turtles, the seizure has been made by one of our task force member from the Customs Service, and he just made a seizure. He had the information, so we start discussing within the task force. This task force has been established with the support of WABiLED through Born Free, and we have this formal discussion area. Also, we start discussing on what we can do together. So he just announced that he had the information that probably we have something coming from Nigeria. So he started working on the intelligence process and he started following the car. So they made the seizure not at the border, but within the city. So they were able to enter in Benin not from the normal way, but they were able to make the seizure. So once they made the seizures, he just called me and say, yeah, we have this seizure. So how can we do? We are lucky because at this time we were conducting a 2 weeks mentoring visit from Bond Street, and they were there. So we had a mentor working with us at this moment. So we were able to discuss directly with them how we can handle with this case. So they were very kind, allowing, giving us very nice advice and how we can move. I call Michael. This is my mentor, my personal mentor. I call him, say that, hi, I have this seizure and probably need to discuss not only in Benin but even though in Nigeria. So I get in touch with Tessie. Tessie is part of the current CITES for Nigeria, and as well with Madame Bosse, who is CITES focal point. We have very close relationship because we were able to stay together, working together, discussing together on wildlife trafficking. So this is the big story behind this seizure. So I can come later on how we deal with the seizure after that.
You know, Ulysse, what I find interesting is the way things have unfolded. And I'll perhaps start by saying, I mentioned to Sean that traffickers sort of don't know what is going to hit them soon in West Africa. Because I'm sitting on this side and watching everything happening, the training, the capacity strengthening, the coordination that is beginning to happen across agencies inside each country, but also between countries. And I'm going, none of this existed a few years back. And these traffickers have no idea about the level of investment that enforcement agencies are putting into getting better organized, better coordinated, and doing their jobs effectively. So I think there's a big change coming, and we are beginning to see the first fruits of that. When you contacted me, the first thing was, what are these species of freshwater turtles? Because that will determine whether they can be released within Benin, whether they have to go back to Nigeria, what processes need to be put in place. And I reached out to one of our contacts in Sierra Leone, Edward Aruna, who is a specialist on reptiles. But we also reached out to Professor Senya Beto of Togo. Now, the interesting thing is Professor Senya Beto is also the supervisor of our current CITES master's students. So he's part of this network. And then, of course, we reached out to Matt Shirley, who helped us draft our pangolin action plan, but who happens to be a reptile expert. And so talking to these people, we were able to immediately determine that there were at least 2 species of freshwater turtles, and one of which was not really very, I don't want to say popular, but its distribution was not widespread in Benin. And so getting the right information for you to be able to do your work, I think that was critical. But also being able to reach out to these different networks of scientists to identify the species, NGOs like Born Free to facilitate the logistics of picking up these sea turtles, and then having access to your colleagues at Customs, at Interpol, at the police, but across in Nigeria. Those are the things that we were not seeing before and that are beginning to click. So it's looking to me like there's been a lot of investment. We are beginning to see things working.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the collaboration part. Both Ulysse and Michael, you've dropped a number of names that are very familiar within WABiLED circles. We work with these people. We work closely with Matt Shirley. We work with Tessie, Bosse, lots of the names you mentioned. They are here within the WABiLED circle. Ulysse is the CITES focal point for Benin. And he mentioned that he contacted Tessie and Madame Bosse. And I'm just wondering, was it Michael who facilitated? Did you meet them? Have you met them prior to this? And how was this contact established? Was it through, how did you meet Tessie and Bosse basically?
Yeah. This is a great opportunity to say again, thank you to WABiLED, to USAID for everything, because, you know, in West Africa, we have what we call West Africa strategy to combat wildlife trafficking. And this strategy suggests that every country should have a national task force, and also networking with the other task force in other countries. And BOSE is a CITES focal point after John, and also John. So I was in contact with John, and then when BOSE took over, I also keep contacting her for everything, not only for this seizure. We have a lot of challenges going on currently in West Africa, working on marine species, working on terrestrial species. So there's a big networking we are currently establishing in West Africa. So my first contact with Tessie was through Michael, because she's a current CITES master program. So this is what I can say about that. Michael?
So sorry, Mike. So I think that speaks, oftentimes we talk about what's our legacy as WABiLED, and I think the legacy is ultimately working with such a highly diverse and well-equipped and high-capacity group of people like all of you. And I think that reinstills the importance of really formulating a slightly more organized network, because at the end of the day, yes, Mike, when WABiLED shuts down in 10 months, of course, you'll be available to answer a call or whatever, but, formalizing it in a slightly more organized structure might help the current focal points and whoever else is working wildlife enforcement in West Africa to sort of have that resource to fall back on that isn't just one person or one project. So it's good to hear that you guys are also working on that. But I had a really quick question. So where does it stand right now? So basically you've been in touch with Tessie. Michael mentioned the additional species that doesn't seem to be, there I use the word indigenous to Benin. So where are we at?
Okay, thank you, Aled. As Michael mentioned, it was 875 turtles that have been seized. So when we went there, we lost 32 at the moment. So we were just thinking about on how we can quickly deal with the remaining, not to having them also dying. So we are lucky. We are, as I mentioned, we have gone free around conducting mentoring program. So we discussed with them, and they were able to quickly found us with to be able to take care of the turtle. So we took them to the suitable place. And then from there, working with the specialists mentioned by Michael, national special as well, national NGOs, we were able to separate them in 4 species. But they were all from the same genus, Pelezios. And the one called Pelezios adansonii was not distributed in Benin. So we need to take care of them. So now currently, we have them somewhere taking care of these species, and discussing with Nigeria to see how we can send them back to Nigeria to be able to release them in the wild there. But for the other species, we work with national NGOs. We do the mapping, and we release them in different species. The first releasing was done with Michael. We're happy to have Michael around. We do it together in forest, one of our forests we call Pau. Forest classé de Pau, not far from Cotonou. And then we released, it was about 100 species there.
It's fabulous to hear what happened and how this seizure was managed by Ulysse. But I'm just thinking back and wondering, a few years ago, Ulysse, would this have been possible? I mean, I'm asking from the perspective of your current expertise on CITES and understanding what needs to happen, but does it also make a difference that the person you are working with, Amandine, is also now trained on CITES? I mean, she's just done the course at the University of Andalusia, and I could see her excitement, her enthusiasm. She was out in the field coordinating this operation with us for the release. She was keen on knowing what was happening and what she could do to contribute. So does it make a difference to have not just yourself trained, but another senior staff of the Forestry and Wildlife Service of Benin who is knowledgeable and who can make things happen.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This is a very, very big difference. And you can see when we start this work in 2019, our first meeting was in Benin with Ivory Coast, meeting people from Customs Service, Forestry Department in Benin. And we realized that we are working in the same area, working for the same matters, but we are not connected, even internally, nationally. So having Amandine as one of the CITES masters today is a very, very, very big opportunity for me, because in the past I was the only one working on this topic in my structure, and it was difficult sometimes to find someone at high level discussing and taking action urgently.
I see. And how high level are we talking?
Amandine.
Yeah,
he's director of fauna. So after our DG, you have Amandine working on wildlife in Benin.
And it makes a difference.
It makes a big difference because discussing directly with the DG, doing the internal or closed meeting, say, yeah, we need to do something. For example, for the sea turtle, for the turtle that we seize, in the past, I should have make a lot of paper to the DG first before having the approval to release them. But since she know what we are doing, she just called the DG. We need to release them. I will refer to you later on. I give you all the feedback. You can trust in the release and everything he's doing. He's in contact with a very big specialist. So the DG is confident. He know that one of his director know what we are doing on the ground. She's involved, and I think this is a very, very big difference now. Things are moving very fast.
Just to confirm for our listeners, DG is like Directeur Général.
Yeah, Directeur Général.
Yeah. Like the general manager.
Yeah.
The director.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
There's something you said earlier. I'm sorry for bringing this back, but about the fact that it wasn't seized at the border and it was seized in the capital. So I think my question is in two parts, right? So first, are there ongoing conversations about how to next time, hopefully there is no next time, but if there's a next time, have it seized at the border? That's one. And also, are there like ongoing conversations with Nigeria to look at ways of preventing, the trafficking in the first place, the crossing borders in the first place? I know you're in contact with Bose and Tessie and probably other people in Nigeria. I just want to know if the conversation extends to, okay, how do we prevent this from happening to this extent the next time?
Okay, thank you. Our border with Nigeria is from the south to the north. We have a very, very long border with Nigeria, and you have a lot of way to enter in Benin, coming from Nigeria. You don't need to go through the official border.
Yeah.
So this is another big challenge. So they are working on state level to see how they can deal with. But as I mentioned, Customs Service, police at the border are now aware of our work, and they are part of our task force. And all the seizures that have been made have been made by the Customs Service. They just hand over later on, and we start working together. So I think things are moving. Hopefully, we are not going to have a new seizure, because we don't hope to have that. But if something would happen, and as I mentioned, they had the information before the car enter. But since it's not come through the official border, they need to follow to use intelligence to find the car in the capital.
One of the interesting things, going back to your question, Eduji, is the fact that before we would not have had things happening the way they did. And it's not always that as enforcement agents, we want to arrest people at the point where we first detect the crime. We're probably curious as to, is it really crime? Are those people we suspect in a position for us to confirm without any doubt that they are conducting criminal activity?
Innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly. And could they lead us to members of a network, because they're not working alone? And I think that is one of the new things that we are seeing with this case. The case itself is not a result. The case is the start of a process of investigation. And that is what is new in West Africa, that the enforcement agencies are now beginning to understand that when they do seizures and arrests, they need to engage an investigation. And these investigations might be national, as is the case in Benin at the moment, but can quickly become regional as soon as Benin is working with Nigeria and there's an investigation within Nigeria, one within Benin, and they are coordinating. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is likely one of the first such cases we are having in West Africa.
So talking about the route, do we know where they were going?
Unfortunately, we are not able to arrest the trafficker. We had the car because he just ran. When they stopped the car, he ran. They were not able to arrest him because they will also to take care of the torture. So he just seized the opportunity to run. So, but from our investigation, it was probably going to Hong Kong. I cannot confirm, but from as I told you, we were having the information prior the car entering Benin, so we have some information on the case.
Yeah.
So we cannot confirm formally, but we suspect that's going to Hong Kong.
And because I believe that that's one of the more common trade spots or final destination for wildlife trade coming out of West Africa. Am I correct in that assumption? That
very, very true. Hong Kong, Vietnam, China, those are some of the hotspots.
Okay. And so normally the route would be, this would go from Benin to North Africa and then probably shipped from North Africa, or does it get... I'm just curious to understand how the ports would work. For example, is the expectation that it would go to like the port in Lomé and then leave from Lomé? Is that a usual route, or is it usually through the desert?
Yeah, everything is possible because, Mike, if you remember, in 2022, we seized a shark fin at the airport. It was coming from DSC, and we seized it at Cotonou airport. But it was going to Accra here by road or by just using the small boat. So there is also a way for trafficking from Benin to Lomé and Accra. And then they were supposed to collect everything here and then send it to Asia from Accra. So there is a platform. There is trafficking network also in West Africa somehow here.
So something like TWICS, the Exchange in Wildlife Information Trade, or sorry, I may have botched that. Trade and Wildlife Information System, exactly. Has Benin subscribed to the TWICS? Is this something that would help strengthen the TWICS?
So definitely it would help strengthen our capacity in West Africa to deal with wildlife trafficking if Benin was part of the TWICS. Unfortunately, Benin is not yet part of the TWICS because there were a number of pilot countries, Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Togo, and Cote d'Ivoire. But I was just discussing with Maliki this week, who is the TWICS manager for West Africa. And in the light of this seizure, Maliki said, Mike, you know what? Even if we don't have the resources for now, we need to do everything to get Benin in on the TWICS. So that is something that we are exploring to see how that could happen, so that we know we have linked the entire, what is called the Lagos-Abidjan corridor, because that's a major trade corridor in West Africa. So a lot of the trafficking occurs along these trade routes. And we are thinking of how to make sure we have fully covered this trade route with the TWICS.
Yeah, and on the same conversation with platforms and networks, I'm just wondering, as WABiLED staff, I know quite a bit about what we are doing, but I want to know generally, there is something planned for, tracking these bad actors, these traffickers digitally. Some of them use platforms. I mean, I'm not going to factually mention which platforms they are, but, this social media platforms, some of them are encrypted platforms. So it's very hard to, track. Some of them use it for drug trafficking and animal trafficking and plants trafficking as well. So I'm just wondering if there are any measures currently to, dismantle those online networks as well.
Yes, of course. As Michael mentioned, for the investigation now, we are using a lot of tools, and we have been trained by Bonfrey and the expert on this kind of way to do investigation. So things are moving. In the past, we are not used to do that. Just arrest the trafficker and that is all. But from now, we know that is the start of where we need to go forward. We need to arrest more people behind the traffic. Who is behind? Who was waiting for the turtle? We need to know all this information from this. If we need to succeed on this investigation, we need to use tools I was just mentioned.
I think, Eduji, the interesting thing about intelligence analysis, which is what we get when we manage our information rights and we ask the right questions, is that it allows us to identify patterns. It allows us to be able to predict or build scenarios for the future and therefore anticipate what the traffickers might be doing. And that's the reason why we are moving from a reactive type of crime analysis towards a more proactive type of intelligence analysis where we build on the data that is available, we see what scenarios are emerging, and our investigations will then be able to anticipate what is happening online. So we can't answer your question with a lot of detail because that is part of the tradecraft, that is part of the confidential nature of what our enforcement agents are doing. But I agree with you. I definitely think that increasingly we will be learning about what the traffickers are doing online and how we can disrupt the online systems that they are now using.
Yeah, I think you and I, Michael, we've had some experiences in Ghana where something has been going on online and then people either text me or text you or text me and then I text you and then you escalate it to the authorities about whether it's lions in the country or tigers or people selling species under protection. And we've had a few, maybe 4 or 5 of those experiences here in Ghana, which also makes me, I think about it a lot. Like, why do people report these things to me? Sometimes I don't see them. Sometimes people send it to me. But I think it just also emphasizes the importance of awareness raising, which is what the comms team here, we do as much as possible. But we also encourage, we can't do it all, and we can't do it in every country. And we encourage our partners and other people concerned with conservation to, spark that public interest, because at the end of the day, the public will be a very good voice, will be a very good, for lack of a better word, whistleblower to help you, make these seizures or even prevent trafficking from happening in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. You are right. And in Benin, currently, I'm like a wildlife man. If you saw my WhatsApp now, just if they saw something in the WhatsApp group selling or killing animal somewhere, send it to me. Hey, at least there's one of your friends in trouble somewhere. Go to help.
But that's great. That's
great. I think there's something interesting. Even my boss, the DG of the General of Sinagrep, I will show you later on. Even yesterday, he sent me something. Ulysse, you need to do something. This is part of the country. Just check. So I think things are moving, and thank you all for your support.
So I have a question for you, Ulysse. It seems like this is very multi-layered, and it seems as though it's like a process that's going to take some time to figure it out. What are your concerns about this investigation concluding well? What needs to happen? If I may, it's those 3 questions. What are your concerns? What needs to happen? And also, what is a glaring, oh my God, we need to fix this part of the process that may have come to you in the last couple of weeks with both? I'm really interested to hear about this ivory seizure, obviously, and the sea turtles as well. Like, those are 2 big things. So are there any aspects of the process where you're like, okay, no, this needs a bit of refining so we can do it better? Have you learned anything from those 2 seizures?
Yes, but also Michael just mentioned that the investigation is still ongoing. Mm-hmm. So most of the information, we need to keep them confidential. And but I think for these 2 cases, it was for example, for the case for the duck seizure in the northern part, I traveled to there and discussed with the prosecutor. And this was the first time the prosecutor said that, yeah, so this is so important. You travel from Cotonou as coordinator of the task force to discuss with us how we can manage that case. So, and this was also the first time the prosecutor allowed us to keep the investigation. He gave us all the mandate to make all the investigation we need. So, I'm confident that we'll succeed in this investigation we are engaging, and let's see what will happen. But from the political perspective, we have all the support. From the judicial perspective, you have all the support, and also we are also confident we can do the work. So I think we will succeed in this investigation.
It's one of those things where you wish, like, okay, more of this should happen, but also you're like, no, less trafficking. But then in the event of more trafficking, we hope like coordination at this level, it remains the same or even gets better.
I hear you. What I just want to say, coming back to Ahmed's question, is more like we've seen how coordination and collaboration can make things work better. Maybe what we would like to see more is planning towards the resources that are required, because this is all very intensive in terms of resources. Resources for picking up these trafficked animals because they are alive. Resources for keeping them alive, feeding them, keeping them in the right environment. In this case, they were aquatic freshwater turtles, so they need a humid environment to be kept in. Yeah. They need to be fed. And then the resources for the release. So this is all really expensive, but it's also the resources for investigation. Yeah. So now we've done all these plans at the regional level, strategies, all these action plans, task forces, national strategies. The real question where I have a bit of a concern is how the different countries, Benin in this instance, are planning, are budgeting towards having dedicated resources for these task forces so that they can act when they need to act, and making sure that there are partners like Born Free in this instance who are available and have some resources to contribute. I mean, Born Free will contribute when they can, but we need to be sure that the countries themselves have planned for this.
I know it's kind of silly for us to say it at the end of the recording, but just for our listeners, Born Free USA is an organization that is a subcontractor of WABiLED, and they handle, alongside Michael, obviously, all of our policy-driven combating wildlife trafficking stuff. Did I summarize it?
And some of the capacity strengthening as well, a good proportion of capacity strengthening, in fact.
Yeah. And I remember it was 2018, 2019, you helped to rescue one, I think it was a loggerhead sea turtle, here in Ghana, in Keta. And we saw how I wasn't there, but you were there, Michael. We saw how resource intensive that was. And so 875 freshwater sea turtles, I can only imagine how resource intensive that is. And that's the sea turtles. You spoke about the elephant tusks, and there are probably other seizures. But there's one thing you said which also makes me feel optimistic, which is that you had some political backing. And so we hope that it grows from there, because that's very important. Like, without the political backing, or the capacity building, if you do all the capacity building and the coordination and everything, once there is very little or no political backing, then it's almost futile.
Yeah, and then we have the support, even at the presidential level. I just want to come back on what Michael just said, because if you saw my own car today, you see it, and in the back, you see the trace of sea turtle and everything, because we don't have enough resources to do the work. But we are doing that because we really love working in.
You have a passion.
I have a passion for that. So even traveling from Cotonou to Kandy, this is 705 kilometers. I do it using the public transportation, because I need to be there on time. So just took the car during the night and then be there in the morning to be able to discuss with the prosecutor. So if I was waiting to see one of my boss, hey, please, can I use your car? I want to be there. So this is something we need to discuss at national level. Things are moving, but we still need support on this matter.
So definitely resources. But there's one other thing I remember you mentioned when we were at the release site. You mentioned it was an old plantation, but you were talking about establishing that plantation as a sanctuary. So I think what is also critical is having a place where we can take these seized wildlife too and take care of them. We don't have many sanctuaries across West Africa. We don't have those kinds of facilities. Is that a big problem?
And in Benin, we don't have at least one. We don't have it. You saw where we put the turtle. We just use the facilities of one of our breeder, and it was also a very speakable place for them. But it was the best we can have at this moment. And so definitely we need to have a sanctuary there. And Michael just saw the place. It's a very nice place. It's not far from Cotonou. We can use it for multi purposes. So we need to work on this side. So we are still thinking to how we can found to be able to have this sanctuary established not far from Cotonou and helping us to take care of live animal seas.
Yeah, of course. Think of it as like emergency response, basically. You know,
exactly.
Like that's what it falls under. So I think we're running out of time. And Ulysse, thank you so much for coming, because we know you're on vacation and you're using your vacation time to talk with us. But if I may, just one final question, because it's not very clear to me. It could be clearer to you guys, but in case if the listeners also. So this coordination that we're doing with the current CITES MSc student Tessie, which is also where you're an alumnus from the University of Andalusia, and that connection that happened through Michael. Are we allowed to maybe discuss a little bit what the next steps that are expected on the Nigerian side are?
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed. Yeah, for the investigation, definitely we'll be working with the Nigerian authorities to see how we can prosecute them on the other side, and also discussing to how we can deal with the sea turtle that can be released in Benin, because the distribution area is not in Benin, so we cannot release them in Benin. So we are discussing with them to see how we can deal with the live sea turtle remaining. Otherwise, we already released all the other species. We are just waiting to finalize the discussion and see how we can do it, because we need money to do that. We need resources to need that to move the species from Cotonou to Lagos probably. So yeah.
So I see two things actually. I see what you are saying about this last species that is not native to Benin needs to go back to Nigeria where it is native, and that's where it can be released. So you would need Tessie's help to organize that.
Exactly.
But also it is a seizure that happened with wildlife coming from Nigeria. So probably the point of origin where such a huge number of specimens were captured would be Nigeria.
Yeah.
And then there's the question of where is this happening? How is it organized? And what can the Nigeria Wildlife Enforcement Taskforce do to identify the culprits within Nigeria? So that's, I think in essence, those are the two areas where you will be collaborating with Tessie.
Alrighty. Well, as cool as this conversation is, it breaks my heart to say that we've come to the point where also I think our listeners will say, whoa, 40-minute podcast, which is a bit of a commitment. So I think let's keep the conversation going with you, Ulysse, over the next couple of weeks. As we find out more, we'll keep the conversation going with Tessie. Thank you so much for always making the time for us. Really, 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 we really appreciate it. And to everybody here, the rest of the WABiLED team, thank you so much for all your additions and the questions that you asked. I think as impromptu as this was probably one of our better and more informative podcasts, I'd say, in terms of conversation. It's a free flow. Mike, I believe you wanted to give a couple of last points.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed. Actually, I was just thinking that I'm not sure whether we made this clear somewhere, but the fact that WABiLED, we've done all the support, we've offered all the support we have to the West African states, but it's thanks to USAID, US government funding through USAID. And if Born Free has been doing what they're doing because they're partner and implementing partner to WABIC and to WABiLED, but they're also getting some additional US government funds from INL. And this is just saying that US government is investing significant resources in supporting West Africa, and especially the ECOWAS Environment Directorate to fight wildlife crime. And this is a seed that is sown. We are increasingly seeing other institutions jumping on the CWT bandwagon. It's been great working with Ulysse, as with the other CITES focal points. We get really excited when we hear these success stories, and we're trying to look for the impact all the time. I think the impact is beginning to be there.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And also, just to reiterate to our listeners, wildlife trafficking is the fourth largest illegal trade on planet Earth. I can't pull the figure off the top of my head. Edgy, can you pull it up, please? Can you, just so we can confirm that information to our listeners, but over $23 billion, thanks, Mike, over $23 billion per year. So it's something people oftentimes, when they think of illicit trade, they'll think of drugs, sex trafficking, and all of these things. And these are obviously very serious issues, and arms, and but wildlife trafficking is quite up there, and I don't think it gets as much eyes on it as it really should. So with that, thank you all very, very much. Ulysse, have a wonderful rest of your stay in Accra.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll see you guys at the next one. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This podcast is made possible by the generous support of the American people through the United States Agency for International Development. The content of this podcast are the sole responsibility of its creators and does not necessarily reflect the views of USAID or the United States government.